video, we will be discussing the region of the Americas known as Mesoamerica, which roughly refers to Mexico and Central America. Together, North and South America stretch for about 11,000 miles in length from north to south. That grand scope of land encompasses multiple climates and ecosystems, including mountains, plains, deserts, rainforests, jungles, and the diversity of the geography, the diversity of the terrain has resulted in diverse societies emerging, from the Inuit Eskimos of northern Canada to the sophisticated city builders of Central America. There is no one American experience or Native American experience that we can talk about in the period prior to the arrival of the Europeans. Rather, we must talk about a variety of experiences, and in this video we'll be focusing on the experiences of the civilizations of Mesoamerica. The first Native Americans arrived in the New World much later than Homo sapiens emerged elsewhere. Reliable evidence suggests to the population of the Americas through 3 migratory waves. Those waves occurred between 30,000 and 10,000 BCE and arrived from Asia, crossing over a land bridge that connected Siberia with modern-day Alaska, a land bridge called Beringia. And during the last ice age, the Pleistocene era, these migrants would make their way southward, moving between glaciers along the Pacific coastal plain to eventually populate the entirety of the Americas. By the late 15th century, 3 types of American societies had emerged. There were nomadic groups, sedentary or semi-sedentary groups, and groups living in large population settlements supported by agricultural surpluses. This third group really only existed in Mesoamerica, supported by the vitality and fertility of the soil in what is modern-day Mexico and Central America. The agricultural revolution emerged in the central part of Mexico around 5500 BCE and spread relatively quickly throughout Mexico, Central America, and down into the coastal highlands of South America in the region of Peru. The agricultural revolution in Mesoamerica supported a variety of crops, including maize, potatoes, pumpkins, beans, squash. And it was incredibly productive. Many archaeologists suggest that the average farmer in Mesoamerica was able to grow enough in 8 to 10 weeks to support his family for an entire year. Now, obviously, they didn't just grow for 8 to 10 weeks, and so the result were tremendous surpluses, stockpiling and trading goods to create vibrant and thriving civilizations like the Olmec, the Maya, the Aztecs, the Toltec, or the Inca. So let's look at a few of the characteristics of some of these civilizations so that you can understand what united or what these Mesoamerican civilizations had in common and how they differed. So we'll start with the Olmec. The Olmec established the first major civilization in Mexico. They lived in the tropical lowlands of south-central Mexico and dominated the region from 1500 to about 300 BCE. We have a number of holes in the historical record, so there's a lot we don't know about the Olmecs. But what we do know is that they set a foundation for many of the later civilizations of the region. For example, the archaeological record suggests that the Olmec had an organized religion with a priesthood, human sacrifices, and pyramids, all of which would be borrowed by the Maya and later civilizations. The Olmec built significant cities such as San Lorenzo and La Venta, and traded goods like obsidian, jade, and rubber. They didn't necessarily consider themselves a united group. There is evidence of infighting within the Olmec civilization, but the things that they shared, like social organization, religion, trade, urban life, would become a foundation for later Mesoamerican civilizations, like the Maya. Around 300 BCE, a weakened Olmec civilization fell to the rise of the Maya. As the Olmec civilization collapsed, the Mayan civilization began to emerge. And the Mayan civilization would build one of the world's most advanced civilizations. For a long time, historians and archaeologists only knew about the Mayan world by virtue of elaborate stonework and pictures that were left by the Maya as they recorded their daily activities. They did have a written language known as the Mayan script, which was deciphered piecemeal by archaeologists, linguistic experts, and historians. Deciphering that written language took most of the 20th century. And in spite of very recent advancements, still only about 90% of the Mayan script has been deciphered. So there's still much to learn about the Mayan world, but what we do know is that they had a written language, an accurate calendar, a complex understanding of mathematics, far more advanced than much later Europeans. We know that by about 300 CE, the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico was governed by a hierarchy of Mayan city-states ruled by hereditary kings, and that as many as 14 million people lived in this group of cities, villages, and the surrounding countryside, making it one of the largest civilizations in the world of its day. We know that they were organized around elaborate cities and that urban life was at the core of the Mayan existence. The Maya built public buildings of amazing dimensions. They had temples, palaces, ball courts, assembly grounds, places where people gathered for religious purposes, for economic purposes, for social purposes. We know that religious belief ordered society. The Mayan religion was polytheistic, meaning that they believed in many gods, and it wasn't what we would consider to be ethical. Instead, they believed that the gods could intervene in people's lives. Gods played multiple roles in human affairs, and those roles weren't always beneficial. So these gods needed to be appeased. And one of the ways of keeping the gods happy was with a steady diet of human blood. And so this resulted in the ritualistic practice of human sacrifice. Human sacrifices were common, but the Maya emphasized quality over quantity, meaning that it was more important to sacrifice a powerful individual than to sacrifice 100 nobodies. Their advanced knowledge of science and mathematics allowed them to date events for more than 2,000 years, creating one of the most accurate calendars of the pre-modern world. And then we know that somewhere around the year 900, they began to decline. There have been a variety of suggestions as to why this happened. Was it drought? Overextension of the empire? Decades of nearly constant warfare? We don't know. But what we do know is that beginning around 900 CE, this once great civilization began to break up. And by the time the Europeans arrived, by the time the Spanish arrived, in the 15th and 16th centuries, there would be little more than a few villages remaining of this once great civilization. Another civilization of Mesoamerica were the Aztecs. And the Aztecs developed out of a group known as the Mexica. Or more specifically, they grew out of a triple alliance between the Mexica, the Texcoco, and the Tlacopan. The Mexica were the dominant tribe and would become an important force in the expansion of the Aztec Empire from a group of nomadic people to a huge state that organized millions of Mesoamericans. In this Aztec Empire, they governed from the city of Tenochtitlan, one of the largest in the world. And they built on earlier civilizations like the Olmec and the Maya, but they also developed their own unique characteristics, particularly pertaining to militarism. In many ways, the Aztec world was organized around conquest, so that their ruling group was a militaristic group of aristocrats. They too practiced a polytheistic religion that engaged in ritualistic human sacrifice, believing that their gods needed to be appeased with a steady diet of human blood, and in this case, it was often quantity over quality, in order to keep nature functioning the way that it was supposed to avoid catastrophe. The Aztec would be conquered by the Spanish when they arrived in the central part of Mexico in the 16th century. The last great civilization that we want to talk about today were the Inca. And the Inca were in coastal South America in the region of Peru. Incan civilization developed out of the fertile valleys of the Peru highlands. Archaeologists don't really know how the Inca people, how the people of the Andes Mountains developed agriculture, but they know that it arrived somewhere around 200 BCE, so significantly later than in the northern part of Mesoamerica, in the central part of Mexico. But this agriculture, this mountain agriculture, would become essential to the vitality and power of the Incan civilization. The Inca believed that their ruler descended from the sun god, and that meant nearly absolute authority for the Incan emperors. The emperors would use this power to expand their empire until it included more than 16 million people and extended from modern-day Ecuador and Colombia down to the southern part of modern-day Peru. Incan society was organized around the Ailu, or clan, which were more or less self-sustaining regions, normally inhabited by extended family members. They were organized and kind of worked on the basis of obligations. All members of the Ailu had obligations to each other. Marriage was mandatory, and the Inca practiced polygamy. Women were often charged with procreating, with having children. Men performed public duties, called the mita system, and paid tribute in the form of taxes to the Incan emperor. As the Incan Empire grew, this system was imposed on conquered people, and land was also often used as a bribe or as a mechanism of control. This rapid expansion and conflict over land produced political and social stress, so that by the time the Spanish arrived in 1532, the Incan Empire had been weakened by nearly a decade of civil war and would eventually fall to Spanish conquest. So we see, with our concluding thoughts here, we see that Mesoamerica gave rise to vibrant civilizations who shared some common characteristics, but also had some differences. And those differences would set them apart from other parts of North and South America, from those nomadic, sedentary, and semi-sedentary groups that we referenced earlier in the video. So it's important to understand that there was no such thing as a singular Native American experience prior to the arrival of the Europeans, but rather these Native American experiences must be understood as the complicated and diverse systems that they actually entailed. Thank you.